Good evening. Welcome to the Thursday, March 7th, 2024 session of the Community Preservation Committee. This meeting is in person and being broadcast. If the public would like to participate, you can email your questions or comments prior to or during the meeting to cpcemails@northandoverma.gov. And if we receive it in time, we will answer it in due course. We keep an eye on the email box during that. And without further ado, we're going to start with review of applications. And the first on the docket is the town applying for the Recplex. So, Ms. Casey, it's all you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here before you tonight. If any of you know a little bit of history about this project, when I was hired here in 2018, former manager Mailer, there were two projects on the docket. One was the senior center and the other was the Recplex. The senior center was delegated to Megan Jopp, then taken over by Andrew Shapiro. I remained faithful to the Recplex. So 5 years later, we are here, and I am thrilled to be here tonight to address the CPC. This is a visual picture of the middle school fields recreation complex, also known as the Recplex. I also brought in the larger board so you can see what each of the elements are. I know this map is a little bit difficult to read. I also gave you an in-person map. So pulling out what the Recplex has to offer. So this facility really has something for all ages and all abilities. A playground, walking trail, exercise course, 2 half basketball courts, 2 multi-purpose courts, an amphitheater, baseball and multiple purpose fields, recreation fields, bocce, shuffleboard, outdoor eating area, concession stand, a plaza with a gazebo, restrooms, and an expanded parking lot. I felt it important to show the timeline that this project has taken. So this project started with some of the people in this room back in 2015. And from 2015, 2016, and 2017, there were multiple meetings held by what was called the Middle School Fields Improvement Committee. And so as you can see, all of the different steps that were taken, Finance Committee approves the CPC request. This is a working group that starts with Waterfield in 2016. And in December of 2016, I think it's really important to note that that committee holds the first of 19 public meetings. So I don't know if some of you recall, we'll get to the planning board meetings later on, but the statement was made that this was not a public process. I would consider 19 public meetings a public process. 2018, meetings continue. CPC approves the project construction. In 2019 is when the planning board meetings begin. 2019 is when the first court case is filed. And now we start entering executive sessions with the Board of Selectmen to discuss the pending litigation. June of 2020, a second case in court is filed by one of the abutters and several of the neighbors. Then that goes to case management and pretrial conferences back in 2020. In 2021, the legal battle continues. There's all these different conferences and hearings through 2022. I'm not going to read them all. And then in 2023, we have the hearing on the civil case that was found in favor of the plaintiff. That was the adverse position case. And I have a slide on that. And then January, there was a hearing on the land case, the planning board's decision. That is still pending the judge. We do not have an ETA on when that will be decided. So going back in time to 2018, this was the budget estimate by our consultants, Waterfield, at that time in 2018. Fast forward, 6 years later, the cost of the project has basically doubled. It went from 9 million to now we're at 18.3. I'm not in the construction business, but it's a combination of rising costs, supply chain issues. So we revisited this to make sure we have an accurate budget for this presentation, and so the consultants provided this to us. And this would be the funding plan. So for CPC money, that's our current funding is 5.6. What would be needed to cover the deficit is 5.9. We're proposing to bond that over 25 years, and I have a sample bonding schedule for total funding of 11.5. Non-CPC funding or general fund funding, there's 1.9. We would need 4.7 to cover. Town plans to bond 3.8 over 25 years, and then the delta of that would come from the booster funding, free cash, and operating funds. As you know, we have to split the funding sources out because there is artificial turf involved, and so anything involved with the artificial turf cannot be funded through the CPC. And this, again, I apologize for the size, but this is a debt service calculator over 25 years, what the principal and the interest payments would be. This slide shows the area that was involved in the adverse possession case. It's the red line at the very top of the diagram. Waterfield has been able to configure the design without losing any substantive changes to the original design. So we were able to exclude that land that was lost, and it does not impact the project at all.
Could you just, for the benefit of the viewing public maybe, explain and even for me, explain what the adverse possession sort of claim meant and what that sort of means and how it all worked out?
Okay. In very layman's terms, there was a fence that was a piece of land that included a fence that was under debate as to who the owner was of that property. So the town felt the town owned the property. The person whose fence that land was on claimed that they owned the land. And we brought that to court, obviously, and the judge ruled in favor of the landowner, not the town. So that's why we had to change the diagram and reconfigure that just specific area of the plan. Thank you. Yes?
What's the land ETA issue that's still pending, the decision?
On the land case, we don't know. Unfortunately.
I'm sorry, does that have to do with this adverse possession still, or?
No, that's about the planning board's decision,
Oh,
but the special permit.
There's no other civil litigation related to the CPA grant? Because, so they moved away from saying that things were covered that shouldn't have been and so forth, so that
Yes.
that was all resolved?
Yes, thank you
Okay.
for pointing that out,
Yeah.
correct. So this land use case is our last of 3 cases that were filed. Thank you.
any legal opinion as to the potential outcome of that?
No, I wouldn't want to make any estimates on what this judge would decide, considering we lost the adverse possession case, and some of us thought that was a slam dunk. So
It is the same judge, though, right?
it is the same judge that is also deciding on this case.
So this whole thing could go up in flames? If
Well,
they,
I mean, I guess the question is, what's the issue left unresolved in land court?
The special permit that the planning
the
board
special
Okay,
permit.
all right.
issued.
Yeah, it's the planning board special.
I think also you presented the alternate design to the judge who has that.
Okay.
Yes. So he has both the original and this design before him.
So what was lost, I'm sorry, what was lost there? Is it just was that just open space there, or?
It was just a fence and some trees, from what I
Just a
understand.
fence.
Yes.
So basically, the impacts to the project of the walking path,
Right.
lighting.
Short number of feet, right? I mean,
We didn't lose any, there's no changes to the fields.
Got it.
but it's the walking path narrowed and the fence line, new fence line will be closer.
Thank you. So the town received several letters of support, obviously from the sports groups, hoping that this will come to fruition. There's needs for, fields as stated in the master plan, the fields master plan. And so we really appreciate the group stepping up and sending several letters. I believe those were in your packets. Whoops, wrong way. That's my brief presentation. Any questions that have not been answered?
Just for the sake of everyone, what is the estimated impact on everyone's tax bill? It's very minor, I believe, isn't it? Around $27 a year?
I do not believe we've calculated with the new figure.
Okay.
A couple of questions. One, when you showed the numbers, you showed the old numbers in detail, but you showed the new numbers in aggregate. Do we have a breakdown of the old numbers? Yeah. So the ones on the left are the old numbers, right?
No, I'm sorry. This whole thing is 2018. This is 2024 because it's broken up into non-CPC items on the right, and then what can be funded is on the left.
Okay, so we can compare the one on the left to the prior page to
Yes,
see the
yep.
deltas of the line. Okay.
Yep, so if you look at line 1, it's the multi-use field with baseball at 2 million. Now it's, whoops, sorry. That particular item has not changed.
The other question I would ask, and this is a really very substantive thing, is that bonding the CPA piece of this thing for 25 years is completely unlike anything we've ever done for CPA since the beginning. The only time we've ever financed anything was a few land purchases where we spread it out over 3 years. 25 years, the big issue is going to be that effectively, if you bond this for 25 years, you have to keep CPA for 25 years. And there's some people that may say, again, having been involved in this game since the beginning of CPA, some people will say, yeah, I like CPA, but I don't want to commit necessarily for 25 more years for CPA. I want the ability to get out. And that was part of the reason why, in the beginning, when we did the land purchases, we only bonded them for 3 or 4 years because we wanted to show that we were open about it. That I think there's some risk in the optics of bonding the CPA piece for 25 years that you're going to get some people that are in favor and are going to vote against it.
So there actually, if and I got this right off the Department of Revenue's website, so if the CPA were revoked at any time in the future, if the community has no CPA debt or has sufficient CPA reserves on hand to pay the remaining debt service, the surcharge would cease at the end of the fiscal year. If there are insufficient funds in the CPA account to pay the remaining debt, the surcharge would continue to be assessed until such time as the remaining debt service amount has been raised. If the current surcharge would generate sufficiently more revenues than needed, the community may request permission from DOR to lower the surcharge to a percentage that would provide the revenue needed to fund the obligations. In either framework, new CPA projects would not be funded after the revocation of the CPA.
Right, but still, it's still, yeah, you have to do the math and see based on, right now we have enough money to pay the whole thing off. And I can make the argument that I think from an optics perspective, it's better to fund the CPA piece of this over 5 years than 25 years, just my opinion, because I think it looks cleaner. Some of the nuances, what we're talking about here, we don't even know the answer to this because we may have, a few very large land purchases come up over the next 5 years. And we may want to bond on those too. And if you are already out 25 years on this, I think it's going to make it harder to get people to agree on these other ones. So the optics of this, I think, is a big deal. I think we need to be very careful about how far out we go with this. And I'm not, 25 years just feels for CPA a little bit longer than we've ever gone, a lot further out than we've ever gone, and we need to be careful about that. I mean, if it's a municipal project, fine, but it's a CPA project, I'm not so sure we should do it for 25 years.
The town is bonding $10 million. 3.8 on the town side and 5.9 on the CPC side?
Yes.
And it's all under general obligation bonds?
Yes, that's how we looked at it. on the general.
And has any of this been considered in the capital budget?
I do not believe the town manager has put this in the 25 capital budget, correct?
I have a question on slide 11 that I anticipate might come up at town meeting. So does this say that the design as it is today could have been done in 2018 without any litigation?
No.
Okay, but so the,
No, because the original design, let me step back. The fence line is still on the town property. However, it was in from the property line. So the intent of the original design was to move the fence back to the property line. So as,
no, but I'm saying, it says,
But there's another
The-
part there, the special permit.
okay. But it
So
says
the-
the plan design hasn't changed as a result of the civil suit.
no, just the impacts to it were the walking path and where the fence line would be. So the fence line doesn't move under this revised sketch. So the impact is the walking path narrows. The intent was to try to keep the playing surface and everything about the development the same, other than what needed to be done.
The other thing, Ron, if, in the 19 meetings we had, it never came up about that, the fence line or any of that. The neighbor never came to any of those meetings. So this happened after we had gone through and had done everything, that this came up. So hey, there were concerns in those 19 meetings, and we addressed them and moved things and eliminated things because there's some things the neighbors didn't want. But this was never brought up.
Yeah, but I still see the question coming up, at least the way
Yeah.
it's worded here, is that this design could have gone forward in 2018.
Well, the only reason why this sketch was developed, and it was developed when the lawsuit was being filed, is the designer looked at it in another way to see what could be done if that, in fact, the town lost that case. That's why this was developed. Technically, this has to go back to the planning board.
Okay.
Yeah, to just piggyback on what Rick's saying, the only reason this was created was because of the lawsuit.
And I think it's worth kind of at least mentioning for the record that we had a very motivated litigant who filed multiple challenges, you know, in terms of what could be built with CPA money. So it was kind of a direct challenge to what parts could be funded under CPA, the planning process, and then all sorts of, you know, land use cases. So, I mean, it was not like, this was not like there was one issue that delayed this. This has been, you know, a long, drawn-out, expensive process.
And like many things during COVID, the cases were continued and, you know, rescheduled, and so there was delay during the legal process as well. So had we not had COVID, we may have been able to speed up this process.
So, did you say when we expect a ruling on the permit issue?
We have no time frame from the judge on when.
No time frame?
No time frame. No.
Could be tomorrow, could be 2 years from now, not even a ballpark?
That's correct.
And so if the judge rules against the town, maybe you can't say or you won't say, but what's the approach at that point?
I don't want to say, but I think we would have to revisit what our next steps would be. Would we
may, if we're gonna
consider
have a-
building at risk? That would have to be considered at that time.
We may, even with this group, want to have a conversation, executive session about that,
Yeah.
about the impact of litigation on our decision this coming year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
So could we look at numbers, to John's point, does it matter if you show us numbers with 5 years versus 25 years, and we could look at both?
Sure, I can certainly do that. Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is anyone else doing a presentation too?
No, I'm trying to look at the two sheets together.
No, thank you.
That's what I mean, that's what I wanted.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. Okay, we'll have the Historical Society come next. Okay, good afternoon. Introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Robin Siegel. I'm the curator and archivist of the North Andover Historical Society.
And I'm Lindsay Mayo. I'm the development coordinator at the North Andover Historical Society.
Great. Nice to meet you.
So our project is digitization of the microfilm of the North Andover Citizen newspaper from 1965 to 2005. We picked this project because, it's just a project of general interest that's super relevant for the history of North Andover. The way that this project works is not only does it digitize the microfilm, which would then make them available in the library and the Historical Society on those organizational computers, but it also does OCR, optical character recognition. So you can type in a search term and you can search through all those years of paper for anything that you're wondering about. So if you have a question about the history during that time period, or you're trying to find out mentions of yourself in the newspaper, you will actually be able to search and find those, which is a huge improvement, because right now we have the microfilm, we have the original papers, but unless you know the exact date that you're looking for, and if you have the time to come in and page through all of that, it's going to take a really, really long time. So this is just a fabulous upgrade, and would not only help our research, but would be accessible to everybody in town. So we're very excited about this project.
Great. Any questions?
The only question I would ask, and this is one I actually have no idea what the answer is, does it fit Foursquare as something that's deemed historical? I mean, in the past, when we've done projects, we've preserved all the town records, and that was a sort of partly digitization, but the stuff was old. I mean, it was 19th century stuff. This is newer. I think it's great. I really love the idea, but we just need to make sure it's covered.
So this actually is a really important project on that end of the spectrum as well, because this era of newspaper is a very fragile, brittle, unstable substance. The newspapers that we have in storage are already literally like crumbling, even though they're not very old. Just the type of paper that was used to produce these newspapers is very unstable, highly acidic. So, you know, even if you put it in acid-free boxes, it's just not gonna last forever. And
Yeah,
then,
it's more along the lines of, I don't know if for projects like this, I honestly don't know the answer, whether there's a time frame that if it's newer than a certain period, it doesn't count, kind of thing.
Well, John, why don't we're going to have everything run through by Christine O'Connor for, for fitting within the law or not. So why don't we see if we can get that done before our meeting next week, and then we'll have an answer.
Yeah.
So,
This one's probably okay, I think, but I would just,
and then
like
just
better-
the micro, like film itself is also not
Yeah.
a stable media.
yeah.
great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Terry, you might find yourself in some of these.
I hadn't decided who would be next, but I do see that there's some younger members of the audience. If they're connected to any application and they need to get home, I would let that application go next. And so- Okay. No? Okay. All right, so.
Like a true parent.
I know. Okay, so then I'll just go back to the list, kind of in order of.
I think Lori wants to go.
Okay, Laurie, go ahead.
Thanks, Zach. I'll be quick, I think, right? I've already been here. Okay, so I'm just gonna give you guys this picture. This is just an idea of what we're thinking. Oops, sorry. And I see how this is at. So we've been going back and forth on this. I think that the funding is sufficient. That being said, I mean, if you're willing to up it by like 15, 20,000, that would give us a cushion, because I've been looking at, we haven't been able to get prices from anyone besides what we already had. Yeah.
You should probably tell me what project we're talking about.
Oh, this is for the stage, sorry. Lori Burzloff, Assistant Town Manager. This is for the stage at the Common. So the application contained the estimate from the architect with the construction estimate to do concrete. That estimate would be what we would use, but on top of the concrete, we would do stamped concrete and then veneer stone around the side. So it would look sort of like that, wouldn't be round. We're looking at 15 by 40, so we're actually increasing the size of the stage. That was in the application too, it's 600 square feet. But I wanted you to get an idea, there's all different kinds of, we can pick old antique brick, you can pick stone that looks, like it's been on the Common for forever. But as far as maintenance and just being able to, for durability, we're thinking this is the best way to go instead of, we don't want to do wood, obviously, because that's just not going to last. And our initial thought was to do composite, which would be less expensive. But after speaking with those in the know, they think that concrete is the better way to go. Because even the composite is more maintenance, won't last as long. So the general idea is you do what they had originally planned, which was more like this with concrete, but don't leave it concrete because the look of that isn't so great. Stamp the top and you do veneers on the side, so it looks like it was all built from brick or stone or however whatever we decide we want to put on the outside. No, actually, we weren't even looking at a roof, to be honest, and that's not included in the estimate. But we can certainly plan for one in the future if we wanted, or look. I have some pictures of the stones. If you just want to see what I'm talking about, it might be easier. There we go. So there's all these kind of different, you can get different colors, you can get something like this. You can't really see this because there's so many people in the way, but you can see sort of the idea that we're talking about in here. With the stone going around the front there. I think this one's in Plymouth. You can do something like this. This is the stamping. This is an example of a stamping. It doesn't have to be this design, but you can do all kinds of different things that they stamp on top of the concrete. I think that was it. Or you could do like a brick veneer. And obviously, these come in all different colors. So basically, it would be the same base that we had priced out, but then we're going to make it more attractive by covering the top and then also the sides. It won't be in the ground like this. It'll be more like the picture we showed you.
So,
Any questions?
I guess this is going to be totally unfair, and I'm saying it rhetorically, but this picture's not very historical, and I realize you're just using it as an example, but this is the old center. It's the historical core of our town. How can we be sure that something is going to be historically appropriate? I mean, would I have to go to the old center committee?
Yep, and I've already emailed them to let them know that this is on the agenda, and obviously we have to go. We're going to be going to them, and they're going to have to approve it.
Okay. Just feels to me, Ron, I don't know how you feel about it, but it feels to me we really should have a clear direction of what we're going to get before we fund it. I mean, because if we just go to town meeting and say, hey, we're going to fund, put in a certain amount of money for a gazebo.
We'll know by town meeting.
No, I know that, but if we go to town meeting and say, look, we want to spend X dollars for a thing, we're not sure what it's going to look like, we're going to form a committee, I feel like we need to do a little bit more in advance of what it's going to look like, so we set clear expectations.
Would it be fair to say, subject to, the Old Town Center approval as well, kind of thing? Because I know here you're working with them.
I think as long as there's one historical board has the final say on it,
So it's a check and balance.
that we should be, and if they deny it, then the funds just come back, or they can, or
And
the town has to go.
Did I hear you, Laura, that you'll have the design before town meeting?
I'm hoping if I can get all the information together. I mean, we
won't know
have.
whether that design is going to get approved. I think, that was not the historic district,
Right.
by town meeting.
But it's my intention to go to the Old Center Historic District before town meeting with
Okay.
these ideas to find out what they want. So the basic, we're not envisioning changing basically that sort of design only in a rectangle that's 15 by 40, and then deciding what they think is best to put around the sides of it and on the top of it. Because we're probably, right now, we're not doing a roof.
So because it's the same material, it doesn't matter what you put on top, right? It turns out.
Right, we're doing concrete, but we're gonna cover the concrete with something that will make it blend in with the historic nature of the common. So that's going to be whatever they tell us they think they want us to use. I mean, there's all different kinds of stone and veneer and brick and that you can use. So I plan on going to them with all the options and just asking them what they think is, the best fit.
Is it fair to say that the physical shape of the stage will remain essentially the same?
Yes.
It's be in the same location?
Yes.
And it'll just be more permanent and safe for use, and we won't have any like change to the sight lines or anything of the common as it's envisioned going forward this year.
No, and that's exactly why we wouldn't want to put a roof on or anything like that, all of these structures that are going up. We just want to replace the stage that's there, but we are making it bigger because talking with Rick Gorman, that stage is not big enough for the concert series that we have at the Common, so it would be nice to have it a little bigger, so that's where we came up with the 15 by 40. He would like it to be bigger than that, but, you know, we said 15 by 40 should be sufficient, with, you know, handicap accessible, so, you know, either the ramp at the back or the ramp on the side and the stairs on the other side, but that's it. The same rectangle, a little bigger, and just with
So
concrete covered.
No concrete around the stage.
No, yeah, not any of that. It would still all be the grass, just gonna be the same stage, same location, and
How about electrical? Is that changing at all? Is that gonna stay the same as it is now?
the electrical is in the, design estimate. I think it's gonna stay the same, they're just gonna have to, they might wanna upgrade it, I don't know, but it's still there, and we're not gonna take it away.
Sometimes you'll put it through the slab.
Oh, okay.
So Lori, do you not want a roof? There's gonna be pushback to a roof? Do you think it's not necessary?
I don't think a roof is necessary.
Okay.
Like,
Does that change the game if there's a roof to it? Does that, allow whatever happens to go on in minor weather that wouldn't otherwise? Or do you have a sense of that? I just wonder if this is an opportunity here to
Well, I can tell you.
improve it and do it a little bit better. I don't know
Yeah.
what pushback there might be there, but
I don't know if there would be pushback in the neighborhood or the Old Center Historic District Commission as far as putting the roof on. We didn't include it in the budget, so that would be an issue. I would imagine, I don't know, you'd know better than me, Rick. I don't know, can you add it next year?
Yeah, you can have.
Yeah, so I think,
is there value to
if
it?
we
I don't know.
felt
Is there
that,
value?
It's a terrible idea.
If you wanted to add the footings that support those columns, they're not that significant. So you can add it later.
Yeah,
If
Yeah.
you wanted to.
yeah.
but we had never envisioned it with a roof. We had always, we just wanted to replace the stage because it's old and ugly and dangerous.
And would this stage require any railings?
Not around the stage. And I don't think it's gonna be that high, but we do have to, the design's gonna have to figure out the handicap accessibility. So, Chief Weir was talking today that, you'd have the rails up the handicap ramp and then, but you wouldn't have to have them around the whole stage necessarily, so, and we would talk to the building inspector about that.
That's low enough, you don't need them.
What?
The stage will be low enough.
Low enough that you don't need it,
them by
right,
code.
yeah. That's what we thought.
Personally, my preference would be no roof.
Yeah, I don't,
To be able to look right through the common and see it wide open.
Well, there might not even be a value to having a roof, right? If it doesn't increase the programming or anything, there might be no value to it.
yeah, it's very difficult to find any pictures without the roof, that's why it was, yeah. We love the Google machine, but it doesn't always give you what you want.
Thank you, Laurie. I think
Okay.
we're all set.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next on the list is the North, Stevens Library North Lawn. Oh, sure, if you want to, sure, okay. Then we want to go with Patriots Park, and then we'll go Patriots Park.
We all will.
Hello again,
Hello.
Leslie Frazier. We
Hi, Leslie.
made our presentation a couple of weeks ago, as you know, and you had some questions, so we have revised the plan, made it a little simpler, actually, but the biggest change was that the North Andover Improvement Society is the group that is submitting this. They are the 501c3 group, And Eva Hamori is the president, she's here tonight. And so it's her contact on there now, not mine. We've always been working together on this, and they've always been on board with it, so it wasn't an issue. So that was the biggest change in that. We also just did the whole project within a year. We didn't stretch it out over the 5 years like we had, that had to do with maintenance, and that isn't what you do. So we got rid of that. Our biggest thing is to preserve and restore the Olmsted plan. That's our goal. And in doing that, we have to be very aware of the hazards that are in the trees. And, excuse me, even the windstorm we had last week, we had more branches down. There was a branch about that big that was hung up in a tree. Neighbor told me, I notified the DPW, they were there the next day to get it, but it's an ongoing problem. So until we alleviate that, it's going to be more work from them and obviously a liability to the town. That's the biggie. So the whole plan is, again, to remove the hazards, to grind up the stumps, to put in the new trees. And that's what we're looking for help with.
So the major difference here is you removed all the maintenance projects, and it's just gonna be the, taking down, the original plantings. We're just restoring the original plantings, back to their.
We're
to their-
taking down the trees that were the big hazards, yes.
Yeah.
And I know there'll be branches that while Mayor Tree is there, they can take down those big branches that are dangerous. So it's mitigating hazards, that's the other piece of it. And as I say, we'll do it within 1 year. It's going to be depending on timing. Now is the perfect timing to do a lot of the work, because the park is not crowded, because the ground's supposed to be frozen, and it's much easier to work when the leaves are not on the trees. Things are much more visible. But we're going to wait, and so that's going to just stretch it out. Do you have any more questions?
No, I'm good. I read the application very carefully, and I thought it hit on the concerns we raised, so I appreciate all the effort that went into
Oh, good.
to rethinking the project and the scope and so forth.
Great.
That's very good.
Great, I was hoping I was reading you okay. Thank you. No other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nope, thank you.
Wait, thank you for your consideration.
Okay, so we're ready for the library North Lawn.
Good evening, it's Kathy Keenan, the Director of the Stevens Memorial Library, and Eva Hamori, who is the library trustee. She is the chairperson of the building committee, so she works very closely with me on a lot of these projects. Sometimes I know other people can explain things differently, that it might make more sense to you. So I know I've answered a lot of questions, both on paper, but sometimes I realize people haven't completely got the concept. So if I'm not explaining it well, we're going to have Eva help me do that.
Great, thank you.
So basically, I submitted an addendum, and part of what I realized, especially after listening to some of the other presentations, like the church, you have so much to go through that perhaps I could help by really distilling the points that when we came to the first meeting, the preview meeting about the intent to file, that I tried to answer all those questions, but sometimes they're buried in a document. So could I help by pulling them out? So that's the intent of what I submitted today. I think the biggest things that came across for me is that in the plan that we submitted with the estimated cost, it did actually outline value-added items that could be taken away. It also identified items where the architect felt we had a reasonable chance of somebody maybe donating some funds for us. But the really biggest financial part there is the contingency funds that come through with the project. And the hope always is that as the project goes forward, you don't have a lot of surprises. And so while we're required to have that kind of contingency going into the contract process, we hope that we give most, if not all of that back. And I felt understanding the cost estimate there was perhaps one of the things that was hardest to just pull out from my presentation. And the other one was about the question about the fence at the corner. And I realized that on the picture that you have, it's a very fine black line that didn't show actually where the fence was going at the corner. And so I probably misspoke saying it's at the corner. It's actually squared off. We're estimating about the distance up of 2 parking spaces, which give plenty of clearance to the corner. And then my very simplistic, as Laurie says, you know, Google can help you with a certain amount. So I found the fence that we are interested in using, and then I found a standard of what's the size of a child. And really to show the point of the fence, that it's that safety barrier to have activities there and not lose anybody either into the street or between the parked cars. So I'm hoping that part maybe helps, and if there's anything else I can answer if that didn't cover the points that maybe were just buried in the other application part.
Great. Thank you. So if we were to look then, like if we could kind of sum it up and net it out, like if, you know, how much do we think, I know 883 was kind of the number that came in and set the bar, and then, you know, taking out the contingencies and so forth, you know, maybe Tim, as the former accountant, can help us, but, you know, what's the number look like if we sort of pull those things out?
Sure. And I tried to do a little bit of math, and this, again, is all estimating based on formulas that were given to me by the architect.
Right.
And the architect was the person who identified the value-added items as well as the donation items.
Mm-hmm.
So the value-added would drop the total project to $768,683. That includes that contingency. I have to say that I was stunned when I looked at the contingency numbers, because they're adding in 8% for just some kind of general condition. But then they're talking about a 20% contingency, and apparently for construction, they put in that high a contingency number.
Mhm.
I'm used to looking at other things that maybe have like a 12% as opposed to 20.
Right.
And then the last part that they put in was a 15% market variance. So when you look at that, you know, 8 and 20 and 15, I was like, oh, geez, that's like 33% or more of the estimate for the project. The hope would be that most of those things don't happen, but especially that market variance,
Mm-hmm.
that's allowing for the fact that we just don't get the project through in time. And I
Right.
did put in a timeline, and I will say that timeline represents our experience with the historic steps, which, if you notice, the fence is up, it's actually happening. To give you the context, we started on the fence project, the historic steps in 2018. So when Dee was just sitting here talking about it, I'm like, yeah, I remember that. You know, our original hopes were repairs on the stairs. It went to a full reconstruction that was going to be $350,000.
Right.
And through 2 years of COVID and everything else, we're now looking at a little over $500,000. So I can
Right.
see that kind of cost. Again, hoping that if we produce the project within a year and a half perhaps, we're not going to need to see that variance at all.
Great. Great. No, I think that's helpful. I think the general conditions, you know, when I look at this, you know, that's kind of the contractor's cost of doing business, like just to roll in and temporary fencing and so forth. So I don't think that's a place we could shave, but I certainly do share your opinion about, you know, when you look at it, 20% contingency and 15% market variance, that's 35% of project costs that are kind of left variable. So that is a fair, you know, that is a good deal, and I think we could definitely look at that. Any other questions?
6% general, that's about 6%, so
Mhm.
that's about average. I don't think you can shave anything out of that. Contingency, I think you can come down. I don't think you'll have that much market variance either.
Okay.
your experience, Rick, when they're doing the line item estimates, do they not take a potential start date and
Yes,
calculate your cost that way, and then because I'm just wondering, when, there's no assumptions here that says these numbers are based on a start date of June 2025 or whatever. It's, so I don't know if these are like today's numbers and he's adding 15%.
Generally, there's a little bit of escalation, especially
Built
in
into the
labor.
lines.
Built into the line items, depending upon when you think the project's going to occur.
Right. And this estimate we had done last October,
Yeah.
you know, in anticipation of coming in for these applications. And when I worked with the architect, I did ask him to think, you know, this is not going to be happening in May of '24, because that's when town meeting happens. So, you know, talk to me about what it might be if it was the fall of '24, or if it happens in the spring of '25, so that he would include that kind of estimates in here for us.
So are the line items with that future estimate in it, or did he use today's numbers and built the estimate into the 15% market variance?
That's a good question. I will ask him that one.
Yeah, that's an important thing. That's like double dipping in a way, but
I mean, you know, as I look at it, you know, I'm looking at it as like a conceptual you know, a budget estimate prepared by an engineer. You know, obviously, they have a great deal of knowledge about all these things, but they're not in the field sort of buying these things on a daily basis, and, you know, there's variability, and, you know, that also assumes that when you look at the plans and what the architects thought was there when the plans were built and what's actually there, sometimes are very different. So, I mean, just like in your house, when you open up a wall and you find things, the same thing will happen on a project like this. So I think, you know, none of us should consider this, you know, very, you know, exceedingly scientific. You know, it's an expert's best guess as to what's going on, and you know, they're building in a contingency because they know you use it. I mean, I've done a lot of construction projects as a facilities engineer, and I've always used a contingency. So, it, you know, the degree changes, but you're always using some of those.
it's like stairs.
Well, and what I'm hoping here is that, you know, mostly we're going to, you know, move the grass and find there's just dirt underneath as opposed to anything else, because there hasn't been anything built in the lawn. So closer to the building, we might encounter something, but, you know, tree roots, we have some really gorgeous trees up there, for instance, and tree roots can go a lot further than you think they do. But the further we get away from the building, I would hope that it's like, hey, it's some loam, it's some grass, and it's pretty easy to move and level. But if you don't plan for the surprise is unpleasant.
This has nothing to do with anything. Was the library built on top of anything?
Oh, we know.
Not,
Yeah.
was there anything there? I thought it was all
No,
field.
I think it was, yeah, it was
It's just that I
an
have
empty
been
lot.
getting more and
But
more involved with
rock,
historical
it's built
stuff.
on top of rock, some good
Yeah,
rock.
yeah, there is some.
That works for me.
There's rock.
That works for me.
Yeah.
This entire project has nothing to do with the structure of the library itself.
That's correct.
Do you have a sense of, if we were to partially fund this project, what a realistic number would be in terms of, that you could potentially raise from outside sources, donors, whatever?
I don't have a sense of a number, but I would say if I have the support from CPC, it makes it much easier to go out and get other people to do it. I will say, and I live in a city that recently was able to do a massive renovation to their public library. And although not everybody uses a library in town, most towns you'll find people, even if they don't use the library, they will come out and support it. And in my hometown, that was exactly what happened. You know, people say, "Oh, you'll never get money for the addition," and yet they did, and they've done a wonderful job. So that's the part that makes me feel encouraged. And we do have a lot of good support for the library in town.
Could you help us understand, maybe give us some examples of some of those value-added items that were removed to reduce the total cost of the project?
All the value-added items were strictly lighting, which I felt the intent is to operate daytime, and so the need for lighting underneath the amphitheater steps, for instance. if we're not there in the dark, we don't need lighting underneath each of the seating areas. I think that's sort of a bell and whistle that architects put in. We saw similar projects done by Waterfield in like college campus grounds where they did use that, where they've got the students out at night. We're not envisioning this as a place where you need a lot of night lighting. So I felt very comfortable having all of that additional lighting removed.
But not all of it would be removed. One of the important things is the paths. The pathways, we still need to improve the lighting there, so that wouldn't be value engineered out.
I noticed that you still included those.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's important.
Yeah, so I just did sort of an estimate, taking out the value added, so the lighting, they listed was like 122,000. Taking out the value added lighting, dropped it from 122 to 42,000. That's really the big hit that was easy to take right off the top.
2/3 of the whole thing.
It looked cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is, it
That's-
does,
it
it
did.
looks lovely, but sometimes you go, what can I afford to do? And you know, that's really what you need to have there, so I think that's the case. I'm trying to be practical about it.
Great. Any more questions?
Let me understand. So your number is 883.
I think are you saying to us, like, there's some flexibility and we could deal with a reduced amount of funding lower than the 883? That's kind of what I hear. Is that an accurate
Yes,
statement?
and what I will say, taking out specifically the lighting and the value engineering, the number would be 765,
Okay.
683.
All right, so we'll go with that. We'll go with that number as our anchor when we talk about the project.
But I guess too, wouldn't we need like a sense of, and I don't know if you can give this to us, but like, you know, is it realistic for you to raise 100 grand? Is it realistic for you to raise 200 grand? Is it, you know, is that completely ridiculous? I guess, you know, some sort of, you know, bellwether. Tell me guys, I don't know, but I think that would be helpful information.
So the town that I live in needed so the library renovation is done with a state grant, and you need to match the funds. So our library foundation put together a program called 1 in 1,000. They got 1,000 people to donate $1,000 in, I don't know, 15 or 16 months. I wouldn't necessarily go for that. I might try something like, 1 in 500. I will be honest and say I know a lot of people in this town that 500 would feel like a comfortable number, for instance. But there are a lot of people who in the past, I get a donation for $25. It takes all of the support and the unity for the community to build it. So I don't expect to see just one person do it. Although, if somebody wanted to show up with all the money, we wouldn't send them away. But I think there's support in the community that, lots of small donations always add up to. And I do have the Friends of the Library who help us fundraise through the sales. The Board of Trustees have an endowment fund. A lot of that, this is always one of those catch questions as well. They have so much money. A lot of it is capital and it cannot be spent. So realistically, you need to look at what they have as interest on the capital and whether or not that part can be spent. Certainly, the trustees would support this project for us as well.
But a lot of our endowment has restrictions as to how the money could be spent, on the book collections, on professional development for the library staff, so we couldn't go into that money, so, yeah. So it's not as good as it sounds.
We're fortunate to have it for those other costs,
Other things,
because
yeah.
what that does do is when they cover those costs for me, then it leaves my other budget money or other donations to use for the things that aren't available there otherwise.
And then just to be clear, so I think, residents of the town understand this. You don't consider this really, it is in some ways, but you don't consider this a beautification project. This is a project that is going to, result in more active use of this space that's not being used.
It's definitely intended to be the outdoor space at the library. It is not beautification. We want it to look nice, but it's not a beautification project. Thank you. That's a good way to phrase it.
Great. Thank you. I think I appreciate all the time and the effort you've put into everything you've done, and we really appreciate the partnership with the library and everything you do for our community. So thank you.
I thank you. As always, we've had great support from the Preservation Committee in the past. And I'm a person who likes history, so I love to see all the things that get done in town, Maybe sometimes it's my turn and maybe sometimes it's not, but, it's all a really wonderful process that we participate here in North Andover, so I appreciate the chance to participate too.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Rick, can I, yeah.
Yeah, you may have it.
Okay. Okay, the next item on the agenda, actually, I can sort of handle one while I get set up for the second one. Before we start talking about CPC financials, I gotta take it over there.
Oh, okay.
Does it need to be plugged in the whole time?
No, you can unplug it.
Okay.
Battery should be charged.
All right. Okay, I did want to give an update on Boston Hill Road property that came before us last year, and then there was talk about it coming this year. So I talked to the trustees who had been in contact with the landowner, and they had received an opinion of an assessment, shared it with the landowner, and the landowner was not interested in continuing in the process. So essentially, the outcome was that, and this is the property up on Boston Hill Road, the outcome was the trustees were not moving forward with the request this year. At the same time, the town had arranged for an assessment of the property to be done in anticipation. So we already had it booked on the calendar and sort of a agreement and a sum agreed and everything to pay for an assessment of the property. And I reached out to the landowner and said, since we have this all set and you've indicated your interest at some point in this land being acquired or funded through town funds, would you agree to allow an assessment to go forward? And Mr. Willis, the landowner, said he did not want an assessment to go forward. So I think I just wanted to get that sort of put into the record that that activity has occurred over the past over this funding cycle, and so that's where we are. Yeah. So what happened was the trustees got an assessment and said, this is what we believe the value of your parcel is as conservation land, and the landowner said, I don't agree with that assessment, and I'm not interested in that transaction. So I do not know what that assessment was at, and so that's why I said, we already have it lined up. We have funds available to do this. We have the person on the schedule. Do we want to go ahead with the assessment? And, since the assessor would have to visit the property, we wanted to ask the property owner if it would be okay to do that. So, all right. So now I can't, projector on. That's what I want, the projector, right? Okay. Oh, Rick, I'm sorry, your thing timed out. I typed.
Capital S.
Lowercase AFETY 365. Safety 365.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Okay, now we're good. All right. Okay. So I want to thank Zach for putting this together in a little bit of a more clear way, I think, and also for those at home that they can see it's a little bit more visible. What I wanted to do was sort of lay out like exactly what's in front of us this year, and then you know, what those totals are in each different category, and then sort of look at that as like a starting point. So, you know, as you can see, open space and recreation, we've got, you know, around 2 million. You know, the lake access is about 980. The library north lawn, you know, 7 something, and then Memorial Park, 21,000, and the town common, 210,000. So that's sort of, you know, 2 million. That's, you know, our biggest bucket. And that's even before we talk about the Recplex, because at the time I put this together, I didn't know, you know, what the funding scheme was for the Recplex. So I put that down below. Historic preservation, total 675 essentially. The meeting house, obviously being the big one, which, you know, we'll discuss next week. I just got the legal opinion back from town council, so I'll share that. And I think we should do the discussion next week. And this week I want to just keep focused on the money and sort of big picture, and not debate any projects per se. And then the newspapers, 15,000. The bell, you know, I think that's probably a big question mark because we don't have the go-ahead from Historic Commission yet on any of that, so, you know, that could come or could not. And then the Stevens Estate Stables for 150. And then affordable housing, 800,000, 300,000 for the generators and 500,000 for the project on Brown Court, I think. And then the Recplex, you know, the $6 million, we saw that, and, you know, I think that, like, in the first few years, Tim, it was about a little over $500,000, right? And then it goes down over time.
Per year.
Right, per year, right. And then, are there any questions on that one first? I'm sorry, I should have stopped there for a second.
Actually, one question unrelated to the fiscal side of it. Historic preservation, I think the only two things that you need input from the Historical Commission are on the bell and the newspaper digitization.
Mm-hmm.
The other two we've actually already voted on.
Right.
So we've got a meeting next Wednesday, so I'll just put those on the agenda.
Great, thank you.
I do think just from an optics point of view, you have to take the Recplex and put it into the open space and recreation.
Oh, yeah. I just
Yeah.
didn't know, like, I just didn't have a dollar amount in terms of how it would be cash flow wise. Because I mean, my thought is let's come up with a number that we think is safe to fund this year before we start debating each individual project. Because, you know, maybe we should just start and say, like, how much pie are we going to have? And then we can look at how many slices we can fit, you know, given that, you know.
But on the Recplex though, it could go one of two ways.
Right.
One is bonded 25 years, you get $500,000 that adds to that number. Or in John's suggestion of, let's pay it out over 5 years, I'm just gonna round number, $1.4 million per year added in there as well. And I'm just throwing a number off the chart.
Right. I mean, yeah, you're right. You separate the cash flow from the expenditure. But remember, when we take this, what'll happen is you take this to town meeting, you have to appropriate the money, and they'll probably have separate articles for this. And anything that's bonded is going to require a 2/3 vote. The rest of it doesn't, but the bonded piece will require a 2/3 vote.
That'd be an interesting one.
Yeah. So that's partly my point of why the sensitivity of this is that you're not talking about you can pretty easily get a majority vote, usually with the people attend town meeting. But to get a 2/3 vote, if something is contentious, there's a little bit more risk involved. And again, I may be off, but, you know, there is risk.
Well, this has been clearly talked about in town for a long time. Do you have a general sense of, that?
I honestly don't know. I talk to people, I think we have to look at all the projects. I mean, a couple of these, the other projects on this list, I know are already raising people's hackles. A lot of people are talking about the church. And people are talking about the library project. So that's where you gotta be careful, because I mean, ultimately, you wanna be able to go in there and say, we've fully vetted everything, we've made some tough decisions, and this is how we're gonna go forward.
On the bond thing, I think it is important to know how much it is. It's not adding dollars to a person's tax bill, but it's nice, it's gotta be important enough to say, this is what it costs per person.
Well, I think people, that's why I asked that question.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Because that's what people are gonna wanna know.
Yep.
Ultimately.
Even double that amount though, Rick, I didn't think was, do you think that raises ire?
No.
I don't think it does, yeah.
No.
No, I think it's the sticker shock of,
But to John's
Right.
point,
Yeah.
the sticker shock, obviously determine the bonding, but
Yeah.
I think when you break it down to how much it is per year, people get a better feel for it that way.
It's a lot harder when a handful of folks end up doubling the price over,
Yeah.
it's unfortunate.
Unfortunate, but that's where we're at.
I like the idea of phasing the release rather than bonding for 25 years. I think it's unlikely CPA is going to be around for 25 years, honestly. We've been around for 25 years already, and I don't think that's, I think if it's a CPA project, we should fund it, and phasing makes more sense to me instead of.
and I don't know if
bonding.
that's, I think there's a fine line, and a question that I have too is like, are we gonna be in the ground so long that we could, they can't start until they have a commitment for all the money. We can't be like, here's 2 million, go work for 12 months and come back for another 2 million. They're not gonna start digging a hole until they have $6 million worth of commitment. And so I don't know, like, that's like a question. Is it a shorter term bond? Do we bond, like, I like the idea of bonding over 5
You gotta
years.
fund I'm not objecting to I don't like the fact that it doubled, but I'm not objecting to funding the money. I'm saying, I don't think we should finance it over 25 years, because I guarantee somebody will get up at town meeting and say, wait a second. You do that, that means you're committing to having CPA for the next 25 years. And despite what she said, that's what will resonate in people's mind at town meeting, and you don't want anybody to raise that issue. That's why I wouldn't do 25 years, because I think it creates the wrong messaging.
I don't think there are 600 people in town who know or care that, like, deeply about CPA. Like, I read it much different politically. Maybe it's a different sort of thing.
If you want to take the risk.
No, I'm just saying.
Vote. Go ahead and roll the dice. But last year, in 25 years of CPA, there's only been one project that was ever turned down at town meeting. It was Stevens Corner, and then it came back the next year and got passed. We almost lost on one of the projects last year. It was the skin of the teeth. It was really close vote. You do not want to take the risk of that happening with the CPA brand. You want the CPA stuff to fly through, because people say, I trust those people, they vetted all the projects are the right projects. But if you start putting projects in there that don't have a lot of broad support, you either got to get the people on your side before town meeting or potentially defer them. Otherwise, you're going to have a battle. And you
I
don't
also
want
think
that.
like the Recplex could be the single most popular thing that the CPA funds. It could be tremendously popular. I talk to parents all the time who are like, the fields are terrible. I got bad practice times. We can't do this. We can't do that. Like, it's
I'm
definitely out
fine
there.
with that. I support the spending the money. I'm saying, don't do it over 25 years. If you do that, you're going to create a problem for yourself.
What's the,
I understand your point, John.
Yeah.
I think we should think about that.
Yeah,
what's the
That's why
thought?
I want to get that number.
yeah.
What's the concern about the CPA not being around 25 years from now? Can you sort of explain that to me? Forgive my.
Well, the whole thing with CPA is you can vote it in, you can vote it out.
Right.
And it's meant to be self-funding year by year, so you could take it out. And so if you bond a project for 25 years, you're effectively having a vote to keep CPA for the next 25 years. And I think the way it was sold to people originally was not that way, that you could take it out when you wanted to, if you didn't want it anymore.
All right, so now let's look at the next page. And so I have the fund balance plus all the encumbrances, leaving us with our net balance of about 7.5. So for those watching at home, the fund balance is all the monies that we have sitting in the CPA account. The encumbrances are projects we funded and we haven't paid out yet. So there's money sitting in the account, like for open space, it's 5-point-something million that's been sitting in the account, for the Recplex for the past, several years, 4, 5, 6 years. Historic preservation and affordable housing, those are outstanding projects and monies that we can't touch. So it leaves us with a net balance of, essentially 7.6 million. And then when you look at our revenue between now and the end of the fiscal year, I believe there's some more match. There's about 900,000 coming in. And then for FY25, I put an estimate. This is lower. The last year I had figures for, we got 2.36 in 2023. So I just went lower, so that we're not overshooting. So about 2.2 million will come in for the surcharge. And the state trust fund in 2023, we got 850,000. So I just reduced that to 650. So, essentially we have another, 3.5 million, that will come into the coffers over the next fiscal year, which would mean that, available for the start of the fiscal year would be about 11.3 million. And so,
Back to the last slide.
What?
Go back to the other slide.
Mm-hmm.
Just give me a balance. So you talked from 3.6 to the next slide. So it's all funded over the next several months, over the next year.
Well, with the exception of the Recplex.
Except for the Recplex.
Right. So, if we did everything that was in front of us except the Recplex,
It'd all be funded on the right side.
it'd all be funded in the right side, yeah.
So, and I think having a substantial cushion will, regardless of how we fund the Recplex, we'll have a substantial cushion at the end of next year, and I think that's always a prudent thing. The one thing that we need to be aware of and keep in the back of our mind, and I don't know when it's going to happen, is there's going to be a number of open space parcels that come up over the next 5 years or 10 years. A few of them are going to be fairly small, and potentially 1 or 2 of them really large. And we need to have enough powder to be able to fund those projects, because ultimately open space is what sold CPA originally, and as much as anything else, that's what people want. And you're right too, by the way, that they do want the recreation as well. But so I think just bear in mind that, it's entirely possible there could be, a $5 million land purchase coming down the road in a number of years. And we just have to be, we want to save money for that. That's the point.
So, I would throw out there that, I would be comfortable with the amount of, I think we should look at each thing, but I think if we got to, if we got to the end of next year with, a net balance of 8. If we were sitting in this room a year from now with a net balance of 8.5, I think that's a pretty good spot. And that would mean we're spending between if we have 3.5 coming in, we're spending somewhere around, 2.5.
What percentage have we historically spent? of what
Well,
we
it's
had?
been, I would say that's a good question. We could go back definitely and look at that. I could
Find my old spreadsheet
pull
from
the reports and
beginning.
do it.
It's varied over time. Obviously, in the very beginning, they, because there were a couple land purchases at the very beginning, we were actually close to negative. But we always build up probably, I'm gonna guess, like a year's worth of, if you looked at,
Right.
if you end up with 4 million in there at the end of next year, that's like a year's worth of incoming money, so. The one thing it's a little bit different now that obviously has helped us is the interest.
Right.
Because two things, the amount in the fund has increased and the rates have increased, so that's kind of a little bit of a boost. It takes a little of the hurt away from the recplex.
Right.
In fact, if somebody raises that as an issue, it's worth saying, well, we probably picked up at least $500,000 or more of money that we wouldn't have by waiting, so. It's a perverse thing, but it's true.
Take the interest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
take the interest, yeah.
What's the rate?
I mean, I hope they get like 4 or 5%.
Yeah, I mean, Lynn Savage she's the master at like getting good interest, good return on our investments when it comes to that, and I know we're well projected.
This is helpful.
Any other thoughts about John or Ron? Any other thoughts about where we should try to land or anything we should sort of worry about? I do think it's worth, and I'll put in an email to the town manager and the assistant town manager that we could see kind of bonding schedules for 5 years and 10 years and 25 years. I think that would.
That's fair. That's an easy schedule for me.
And the only other thing I wanted to talk about, I got an email from the CPC, from Stuart, and I thought this was interesting, that the town reports, actually this doesn't show up at all,
No.
but the town does a report every year on the CPC that's available in a state database. And we'll put the link in the minutes, so if anyone wants to read it. But it is kind of interesting because you can pull down every single town and sort of see where they are and how they're spending their funds, and it's all reported in the state database is really good because it's all reported in the same way. And
So, one point on that I noticed is it seems like half the towns are reporting recreation as a separate item, and about half of them aren't, and we aren't. North Andover isn't breaking out recreation from open space.
yeah.
So I'm wondering if that's something we should consider having the town do going forward, so it's more obvious what we're.
Right. Well, that's a good point. Okay, any other?
Is there guidance on whether those two should be together?
It would come from the state.
I mean, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understood, originally it was kind of open space and very much like passive recreation. And then the CPA Act was amended at a certain point to be more inclusive towards recreation projects, and I don't know when that was.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I take the one twist, and frankly, I don't think in the end it matters all that much how we do it. But if you look at the legislation, there's still 3 buckets, and they lump open space and recreation in one bucket because you're supposed to take at least 10% of the money that new comes in every year and use it for those purposes. And if you don't have projects in that area, you have to reserve the money for future projects. So, but I mean, we split it out in separate pieces and then we aggregate it. It really doesn't matter, I don't think. I mean, either way,
Yeah.
I think being transparent is really the best thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I can definitely send an email to the finance director, ask her if we can split it out, because I'm sure it's not hard. Probably, I mean, it's the same thing as everything. If you change the way you report the data, you're limited in it changes your analysis. Okay, any other questions before we move on to meeting minutes?
Well, I was gonna, do we have time to talk about what information you got on the meeting house? See, I think I know you don't, but that would give us a clear understanding what we're,
Yeah. So I got it like this morning, and so I was debating whether we wanted to make it a big thing. Essentially, she said the structure set out by the meeting house meets the constitutional tests by the meeting house application. So I'll send it out, but it was a very thorough sort of analysis of the three prongs, and she said, like, at the end, I would, the committee would be free, would be free to fund this project in whatever way they saw fit. So, and I would say, like, obviously it's very complex. I didn't even really, I was like, half reading it during a conference call today, so I can't even say I've completely digested it. But I would say the prongs of the argument that resonated with her were, one, the fact that there was a nonprofit taking care of the thing, different from the church, the 501c3. Two, that there was that it was all exterior work that they were applying for and not interior. It's important. Three, that the historic value of the church had been sort of proven, over a period of time, so that it was there. And four, that it was also open and used for community events, so that the benefit was not restricted to sort of congregants of the thing. So yeah, I'll send it around, but I wasn't, I didn't think we'd be really prepared to dive in, given the late nature of it arriving.
I was just wondering if it was even gonna be on the table,
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah,
Sounds
yeah.
like yes, right?
It sounds like yes, and it's kind of the ball's in our court now, kind of talk about it, but. No, I mean, I think it's a pretty fascinating topic, I think, because, you had the Acton decision, but you also have lots of federal decisions which say you can't discriminate against churches because they're churches, and so you have like two cross currents, the state law and the federal law, so I thought.
But
it's
yeah, I
very
think one of the interesting things is there have been a lot of projects throughout the state that have been funded since then and no further litigation, which is
Right.
interesting.
Right. Yeah. I think we want to make sure our lawyer is on the sidelines as much as possible. Okay. All right, meeting minutes, February 8th and February 9th. I don't remember. I'm just looking quickly to see if any, on the 8th, everybody who's here was there on the 8th. So we have a motion relative to the minutes of February 8th.
Move to accept minutes as documented of February 8th.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. And then the meetings of the 15th, same thing, everyone was there, so no one has to abstain.
Motion to approve the minutes as drafted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any further motions?
So the next meeting, I'm gonna be remote, is that a problem?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
not a problem at all.
Okay.
We're all set. We have it,
That means Bill has to read some.
I know.
yeah. We gotta wheel the screen around, so.
Yeah. I won't use the ocean as a backstop.
If you do, at least wear a shirt.
I'll save you all that.
Great. Any further motions?
To adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.